May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable to you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. We do not go on forever. Our lives are limited. Even our greatest achievements will come to an end. What are we called to do, therefore, in light of this reality? A story is told of one man who really did not want to face his limitations. It illustrates the mixed messages we send and receive about our lives someday coming to an end, and also about the end of the world. On TV recently, there was a preacher who talked for about an hour about his new book that supposedly explained everything we needed to know about the coming of Jesus and the end of time. You must buy this book, he said, over and over again, with a telephone number flashing at the bottom of the screen. Seems that he was the only one who had the prophetic insight into world events, and for a mere $14.95, we could have the benefit of his wisdom. We would not survive the coming terrors, however, he said, unless we had this book. A pastor called the number, another pastor, and suggested to the poor operator that was picking up that if this preacher really thought this was so vital to the survival of the planet and that the end was so near, he should just give the book away. I mean, he wouldn't need the money where he was going, right? It's all coming to an end. Who needs a bank account? True, it costs him money to print the book, but he will not have to pay for it, actually, if things go the way he says they're going to go. The woman on the other end was not amused. Sorry, sir, I'm afraid I just don't know too much about theology. And the pastor responded, well, don't worry, neither does the writer of the book that you're selling. The truth that this pastor was trying to convey to the operator, the guy who called in, was, as I said in my opener, we do not go on forever. Even our great achievements in our families or in our careers are terminal. Neither books, nor temples, nor plaques with our names engraved on them in our churches, none of these things will last forever. This is the truth that we hear at the end of our liturgical year. This style of biblical story that we hear just before Advent and Christmas is always called apocalyptic literature. Apocalyptic means unveiling. The veil comes down. Or it could mean revelation. Apocalyptic literature was written to convey several forceful realities. First, it believes that God is all-powerful and will defeat the forces of evil. Even in the midst of our anxious times or times of calamity, God is in charge, and there is a future for us. Second, our lives are limited, as are our achievements. And third, apocalyptic literature calls upon us to stand firm and to join for the battles against injustice, and right in things that are not righteous. It's not always easy to face those realities. In the midst of anxieties, terrors, and calamities of our lives and of this world, in the midst of so many deaths by COVID, over the year and a half that we've been dealing with it, or stories of mass shootings. We'd much rather hear about the God of love and mercy than the God of the end times. But in the gospel for today, it's clear that Jesus' listeners were living in fearful and anxious times. And in the face of those anxieties, Jesus' listeners were trying to hold on to something that seemed unmovable and unshakable to them, and that was the temple in Jerusalem. They were saying, look at these stones, look at these pillars. It seemed so majestic, it was eternal to them. Well, as I implied, we, like Jesus' listeners, live in fearful and anxious times. We look around and see things which we hope will last forever, but we're not sure. The philosopher Ernst Becker, who wrote The Denial of Death, spoke of our many ideologies of immortality. There are many, many things, he said, that we create: art, culture, architecture, our institutions, our political achievements. The list could go on. And we engage in many of those things, sometimes really more for our desire to somehow escape the biblical word. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. True, my life will end and I will disappear to this earth, but we think, well, I have things I can hold on to, or I have things I can pass on to my children and grandchildren. I could endow a chair at the university. I could contribute money to my church and have my name engraved on a plaque. I can give money to a charity to help provide the poor that charity assists. And Becker says that because we know we're mortal, we try to pretend that these other institutions are immortal. We know we're going to die someday, but we think my college, my church, my club, even the nation will last forever. But Jesus says all of this is a myth. It all melts down, disintegrates, and turns to dust. What the readings today are pointing to is that the reality of facing our limits and facing the facts that our lives don't go on forever is actually life-giving and necessary. What do I mean by that? Well, I've had the experience when I've served as a chaplain, as well as in just about every parish that I've served, of visiting people who are dying from cancer. And over the course of their illness and treatments, these people go through the normal stages of grief so that they may begin to let go. And if they do so faithfully, they end up coming to a place of acceptance or reconciliation. But what was most amazing to me is that people go beyond mere acceptance and reconciliation to a place that represents something new in their lives. As one woman said, I've been forced to go on this journey that I did not want to take. Although this has been the worst time of my life, it's also been the best time in a way. I'm closer to God than I've ever been. And because so many of the things I leaned on have been taken from me, I've been forced to lean on Jesus. And I have found him to be trustworthy and true. And she concluded by saying, "It is well with my soul." What is clear in Mark's gospel today, and indeed in all of the New Testament, is that God is recreating our world. Old things are passing away. New things are being created. And in fact, the New Testament, as we know it, makes clear that the end has already begun. It began when God raised Jesus from the dead. Jesus' resurrection is just the first installment, the down payment, if you will, of the recreation of the world. And so the end of time, whether it's the end of time in our own life or the end of time in the entire world, is not just an end, it's also the beginning of a new creation. Of course, Hannah says something similar this morning when she talks about God caring for the poor, for the righteous. It will be a rising of the sun of righteousness with healing in its wings. So the end is not only a new creation, it's also a time of healing and being made whole for all of us who believe and endure to the end. God will come. God will be with us, says the gospel. And in the meantime, we may live as those who've seen something about tomorrow which the world may not yet have seen. What we've seen is that in the end, here comes God. There is a future for us. The future has a name and a face. That face is Jesus. And in that face, we see the full splendor of God's face. The night before his tragic death, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke in an apocalyptic tone. He looked ahead, beyond the moment, beyond the civil rights movement even, beyond his own life, and spoke of seeing the promised land. This is the vision at the end that gives one hope to endure beyond the end. And he said, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. And I don't mind. I just want to do God's will. And he's allowed me to go up this mountain. And I've looked over. And I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people, we will get to the promised land. And so I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. And I'm not fearing any man, because mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. King knew the reality that if we remain faithful and endure despite all our anxieties and calamities, despite the anxieties in the world around us, we will be healed and made whole as individuals, as a church, and as a people in this nation. We will endure if we listen to the words of Jesus. All of these things, wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, famines, and so forth, are but the beginnings of birth pangs. Perhaps our new life begins with the simple admission that we need new life. As we watch the meltdown of anything that we hold dear, if we can reach out for new life to Christ, we'll find ourselves leaning on those everlasting arms. And therein is our hope. Amen.